So as someone who visibly does not get laid, sometimes when I was younger, let's say like 18, 19, I would confide in friends of mine, mostly female friends of mine. I have mostly female friends. I don't have a lot of male friends, about my male loneliness epidemic, my male loneliness and sexual frustration. I cringe while I say it, because the internet has made it cringe, and now in order to appear self-aware, I have to cringe while I say it. I have to cringe while I say it, or I'm not self-aware enough, which has caused me to be neurotic. I'm a neurotic now. But yeah, I would confide in these friends, and they would give me advice, on what to do to solve this loneliness and this sexual frustration. And that's not really what I was looking for one thing, right? I wasn't really looking for advice. I was kind of complaining about something that I don't have control over, something that's bigger than me, that exists out there in the world, in society, and that is just, bumming me out. I was emotionally confiding. And I think that when you answer everyone who's trying to emotionally confide in you about anything with advice about how they can better solve their problem, it's very patronizing, and it's very accusational, it's very blame driven. I feel like the implication is that it's your fault, right? Hey, it's your fault that you're in this mess. So here's some advice on what you can do to get yourself out of this mess that you created, right? So I'm not a fan of advice in general when it comes to subjects like this. When it comes to pretty much any subject, really. But this is, I think, the worst advice. This is the worst advice I've gotten. And the worst advice is, well, you should allow things to happen organically. Should allow things to happen organically. I think that, for one thing, this is a little bit like privileged, I guess you could say, because I do think that, without getting into anything biological or anything like that, in strictly social constructionist terms, in the society we currently live in, for one reason or another, historically, it seems to be the case that men ask out women, right? If you go to a school dance, right, sometimes they'll have a women ask the guys dance. And the implication of having a women ask the guys dance is that typically every other dance that wasn't specifically called a women ask the guys dance was automatically a guys ask the girls dance, right? So the expectation is that as a man, you are going to do the work of asking the women out, finding the women. You're going to do the work of pursuing. And the women's job is to sort of gatekeep, to sort of sift through the various offers they've received and determine which of these men is the most eligible and who they want to date. So given that is the present state of things, it does come off to me as more than a little bit privileged to give the advice to men that they should stop stressing so much. And I understand where this comes from, right? They're seeing a young man who is probably just thinking about this a lot, right? He's probably not doing much. He might be alone in his bedroom most nights, right? But he's just thinking about how lonely and sexually frustrated he is. He's just thinking, how do I get a girlfriend? How do I get a girlfriend all day long? And so these women are trying to help with that, I think. They're trying to respond to that by saying, don't stress so much. It's going to happen on its own. It's going to happen organically at some point. Look at your father's generation. Look at your father's father's generation. At some point, clearly, your schmuck of a dad managed to find someone and marry her. I don't know how that happened. I'm assuming your dad is a schmuck. I'm assuming that's the case. Okay? I don't know your father personally, but I think it's safe to assume he's a schmuck. But he somehow found somebody, right? So given that's the case, maybe stop stressing so much. But I think that is terrible advice. That is the worst advice you can give to young men in the current world as it exists. Because in reality, men need to go out and pursue women in the state of the world as it is. The real advice we should be giving to everyone, young men and women alike, is to go out and find more community. Be more extroverted. People are isolated right now. People are alienated. And to tell people that you should just wait and allow things to happen organically seems like the exact opposite of a solution to that problem. The real solution is to go outside and to go to real world events and meet as many people as possible. I think that would be even more effective strategy of finding a girlfriend than being swole or having a good facial structure or whatever other stuff, right? I don't think those things don't matter at all. I think it matters to be hot. It's weird that that's a controversial take. I do think it matters to be hot, but I still think it matters more to just meet a lot of people, right? You have to meet people in real life. And one of the other problems with this piece of advice about just allow it to happen organically is that in today's world, right, what does that mean to allow it to happen organically? The only incidental meeting places that we have really are like our workplaces. Do you want us to meet our coworkers? Is that the goal here? Is to encourage the average man to be very dependent upon the small handful of female coworkers he has falling in love with him because they're the only women in his life, and if they don't want him back, no one else exists in the world who will? Is that really the condition we want to create? I've known guys in that situation. I've known guys who never leave their house and they just go to work and they have a bit of a crush on the cute girl in their workplace, and they also kind of hate her. Like you listen to them talk and they're not in love with this girl, they kind of hate her, but she's the one cute girl in their workplace and she doesn't love them back, and they're so mad about it. They're so mad about it because what else are they gonna do? They don't have any other options in their mind. Other women don't really exist to them. The woman in the workplace does because they see her every day. If you only see that one woman, you're gonna get really attached to her, and you're not going to be able to respond with as much maturity when she rejects you. Additionally, obviously, we don't want to be encouraging like workplace harassment and so on. And not that every time you flirt with a coworker, it's automatically necessarily harassment, but I don't think people are wrong that line can be a little bit hard to find sometimes. And it's probably a safer bet for the average man who is scared of accidentally crossing that line, which is a good thing, by the way. It's good that men have an instinct of being maybe a little bit scared to cross that line. That shows that they want to respect that line. Right? If men are saying, like, I don't know where the line is, and your response is like, oh, fuck you, you know where the line is, right? You're misunderstanding. Because the men who are saying, I don't know where the line is, I would hope, most of them, they're saying that because they do care where the line is, and they want to know, desperately, right? So, yeah, I think that encouraging things to happen organically encourages things to happen in the workplace, and that is not really what we want. We want people to go outside of the workplace. The other big problem with this piece of advice is that it encourages men to try, if they're going to try to get a girlfriend, to make it seem from her perspective that things are happening organically. Because all of the women in their life are telling them, personally, I don't want a guy who just came out of the blue and asked me out because he thinks I'm cute, right? That makes me feel objectified. That makes me feel like he only cares about my body. So I want a guy who's going to come out and say, like, no, I'm like you for you. And the guys who are most likely to like you for you are the guys who already happened to be your friends prior to any indication that dating could ever possibly happen. And so as a guy, what you're basically hearing from these women in their life is that not only do they advise you to allow things to happen organically, but they prefer when things happen organically. So as a guy, what you're hearing is the meta, you know? Because I know you're my fans. I know you're all a bunch of gamers out there. You gamers, you know what a meta is. A meta is the most effective tactic available in a video game. And what these women are basically teaching men is that the meta for getting a girlfriend, okay, is to befriend her first, get your foot in the door, wait, be kind to her, don't move too quickly, don't ask her out right away, wait maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, maybe a couple of lifetimes, you know, wait as long as you can possibly stand to wait, because the longer that you wait, the more likely it is that she will think of you as an upstanding gentleman who only likes her as a friend. And then, if you happen to develop feelings for each other, it's as though things are happening organically. And so, I think maybe some men are like sociopathically like, how do I manipulate the game? How do I manipulate the system? How do I convince these women to date me? But most men aren't consciously thinking of it that way. They're just realizing that women do not like to be seen as not special. And that if they're just a random person you happen to match with on a dating app, because you were swiping right on everyone, which is something I used to do, which is a stupid thing to do, don't do that. Swiping right on everybody, or you're just walking up to a stranger at a bar, and you're flirting with her because you find her attractive. If the lesson we're teaching young men is that women hate that, because it makes them feel objectified, right? If that's the lesson we're teaching them, then they're just kind of learning organically, without consciously thinking about it or consciously trying to manipulate anyone, that the optimal strategy for getting a girlfriend is to allow things to happen organically. And so what ends up happening there is sometimes men will befriend a girl, and they'll be seeing that girl for maybe even months, right? And then all of a sudden, you know, the girl gets a boyfriend, right? The girl gets a boyfriend. Why? Because the boyfriend asked her out. And then the guy will be like, what the hell happened? I thought this was my girl. And she's like, what are you talking about? You've never expressed any interest in me. You never asked me out before. And she's absolutely right. He's a fucking idiot. Right? But he's an idiot for a reason. And you can say that morally speaking, that these men are in the wrong. And I'm not even going to disagree with you there. Sure, morally these men are in the wrong, but you have created, as a society, we have all created the conditions whereby every incentive pushes them to behave that way, and to look at them as an individual and just be like, that's not a very cool thing to do. That is not a solution. The solution is to change the cultural narrative and to change the incentive structure. Right now, the incentive structure that we have created encourages the average young man to waste a ton of time, to have a ton of sunk cost on a small handful of women who he knows organically in his life, and then to get rejected by them. And then we're surprised when the men react in emotionally immature ways when they're rejected. It's because they've put a ton of time and energy and commitment into it, and they don't have very many other prospects. So when they do get rejected, it's as though it's the end of the world when it really shouldn't be. We have created our own problem here. So I think that it's bad advice. Yeah, I think it's bad advice to try and encourage men to meet women organically, because you're creating all of the conditions for men to want to ghost women right away. And I used to believe basically that if you are talking to a girl and you ask her out and she's not interested and she's like, but we can totally still be friends though, because that's like the common response, right? My response at one point in my life was like, nah, I'm good. Because you gotta think, this was high school, this was college. I was surrounded by people my own age, and I felt at that time, because I'm kind of an extrovert, I felt at that time that I had plenty of friends in my life. I had tons and tons of friends. I didn't need more friends. And I felt somewhat insulted that my problem, which was really that I didn't have touch, I didn't have love, and I didn't have, frankly, sex, right? I didn't have any of those things. I found it really insulting that I was being told that I just need more friends. That, oh, I'd be happy to be your friend. You know what the problem is? The problem is that men don't hug each other enough. They just don't hug each other. If men just hugged each other more, you wouldn't be so worried about this. No. And I am still insulted to an extent by that line of argumentation. I do find it ridiculous. But I was wrong to think that the right response is to not worry about having platonic friends and to only worry about having a girlfriend or having a sex partner or whatever, right? I was wrong about that. What you want to have is as many friends as is humanly possible, male and female alike, as many platonic acquaintances as you possibly can. That's the right approach. The ideal scenario, the ideal advice that you should be giving young men, and if you are a woman and you're listening, and I hope that my channel does not completely alienate women, if you're a woman and you're listening, I would hope that this is the advice that you give to men. That instead of telling men to wait for things to happen organically, tell men to just be extroverted. Tell them to find communities. And an ideal community, the big thing that distinguishes a community, in my opinion, from like a cult or some other negative organization like that, is that where a cult discourages you from having friends and family outside of that group, a community encourages you to find as many more communities as possible. A community is when you go to a group of people who hypothetically play board games together, and then they invite you into a Discord server, hypothetically. And then on that Discord server, you're invited to another group where they just work out together. A couple of the dudes from the board game meetup just go and they go for a morning run. And so now you have a circle of people shooting off of your first circle of people. I do this all the time these days. I didn't always, but in recent years, maybe the last year, in my life, I have been doing this non-stop. I have been working at this as if it is my sole life mission. And it's been paying off. It really has been. Because I've been finding communities that find communities for me. The first couple are hard, because you have to find a couple of regular meetups of some kind in your life that you can go to. But once you find a couple, you can find a couple more springing off of them. Those are the best communities. The best communities are communities that find you other communities. And that's really what you need. The girl who doesn't want to date you, but just wants to be your friend, has a friend who has a friend who has a friend who might actually want to date you. And if you don't befriend the first person in that chain, you're never going to get to the end of the chain, and you're never going to get anything better. So if you are trying to give somebody advice on this subject, my advice, and the advice I would always give, is to not give advice at all. Don't patronize somebody by giving them advice and making it seem like they can solve their own problem completely. The best thing to do is to already have communities in your life, to already have a bunch of different places that you go to, that you know about, where you can meet people, where you can have friends in your own life, and then when you meet someone who doesn't have that, you can just invite them to yours. That's the best solution. Hey man, I don't know how to solve your problem. It's not your fault. Okay? You're right that something is deeply wrong with our society. I go to this board game meetup. Why don't you come with me? That's the actual solution.